And I want to make sure, this is like the most important thing here. If everyone take a look, we have reading notes on and off the staff, okay? Everyone here should feel quite comfortable, at least with middle C position, G position, low C position. If you're not sure what I'm talking about and you're still new to reading, that's totally fine. At least all of you should be able to recognize middle C. Okay, so everyone here recognizes middle C, and then most of the notes in treble clef, most of the notes in bass clef. And judging on everyone that's here right now, I am confident that all of you know this stuff, okay? So we call this the grand staff when we have the treble clef and bass clef together. Basically, if they are not together, it's not the grand staff. You just call it treble clef by itself or bass clef by itself. But when we're reading piano music, usually we are reading the grand staff, which is two pairs of staffs put together. A staff is the 5 lines, 4 spaces. So now moving on to this acronym here. I had to draw this out myself because I could not find good quality ones that I liked online. So notice treble clef, we use F-A-C-E. So the bottom space, I'm just going to use this whiteboard thing here. You can see me, can everyone see me circling that? Yeah, oh, that's so cool. Okay, I should probably get a pen. So that, let me delete that. So F-A-C-E from bottom to top, this acronym here is just spelling out the name face. Everyone knows how to spell face. So how it works is 1, that is the first space, 2, 3, and 4, just like that, okay? So F-A-C-E, only use this acronym for spaces for treble clef, okay? And then we move on to treble clef lines. We have every good boy does fine, okay? Because we have 5 lines, so there has to be 5 words, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Please use this for any note that you may have confusion over, especially if it's the line note in treble clef. I like to use every good boy deserves fries or every good boy deserves fudge. So you guys can change the last 2 words here, or every good bird does fly, whatever works. So write down what works for you, because the goal is you should memorize this if you haven't already. If you're able to read the notes without these acronyms, that's ideally the goal. But, you know, I know sometimes it's still difficult, especially when you're new to everything. Okay, so we're moving on. How do I get out to this? Here we go. Bass clef acronyms. So bass clef acronyms, usually your left hand is in bass clef, but you know, in the future, sometimes your right hand can be playing bass clef too, especially if you're crossing over. Bass clef, we have all cows eat grass for spaces. Okay, so all cows eat grass, remember, space 1, 2, 3, 4. Some people like to use all cars eat gas. And then bass clef lines, we have good bikes don't fall apart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? A lot of people mix this one up. A lot of my students say good boys do fine always. And then they mix it up with treble clef. So that's kind of why I don't like using good boys do fine always for bass clef, because it gets really confusing. And I think for treble clef, you should only do every good boy does fine or every good boy deserves fudge. For bass clef, let's pick something different. Good bikes don't fall apart, or green burritos. You can change this. Green burritos don't fall apart. We could even say great big dogs fight animals. Great big dogs fight animals, whatever you want to use, as long as you memorize it. Okay, so I hope all of you have your treble and bass clef acronyms down pat. That's kind of the goal, and that will help you with your reading, especially notes on the staff. As for notes off the staff, let me come back to the slide. The only notes that you have off of the staff here are these 3 notes here. Sorry, I'm using my finger to circle all this, so it's kind of fat. So this middle C, and then you have a D above middle C, and then you have a B below middle C. So those are your ledger line notes, at least all the notes that you should know right now. Basically everything on this page, this PowerPoint, which I will send to all of the participants that came today, so you can have it for yourself. You're only going to learn these 3 ledger lines. In the future, you will learn, take a look, oops, you will learn ledger lines down here. So in bass clef, something like this, and then in treble clef up here, you know, and it'll keep going up. Sorry, that's really ugly. But right now the goal is, can you learn everything from the bottom line here all the way up to this top line in treble clef? If you can know all of those notes, then you're set. Okay, so now moving down to slide number 5. Okay, so in addition to really understanding your notes on and off the staff and your acronyms, we also need to understand something called whole steps and half steps. So whole steps are basically when you have 2 notes and there's a note in between. So notice these blue arrows here. These are all whole steps. The A to the B is a whole step. So this A to the B, because there's a note in the middle, this note right here is in the middle. That's why it's a whole step. This sharp to this sharp is a whole step because the A is in between. Okay, so look at these from here to here. Has to be a whole step because you have this B in between. From B to C sharp has to be a whole step. There's a C in between. Okay, so that's how the whole steps work. And then with half steps. So with half steps, basically it's notes that are directly right next to each other. If we were climbing a ladder of all the keys in order, if I started on C here, the next note going up a half step would be C sharp. Then the next note going up would be D. The next note going up, D sharp, and then so forth. You see, I'm zigzagging through because this is all the notes in order going up like this. Okay, so basically all of these green markings that I just scribbled in, they're all half steps apart. All right, but now I'm going to delete that. And if I asked you, hey, what are these 2 notes? The one that I just marked right now, it's a half step because there's no note in between. Okay, these 2 here, half step. All right, these 2 here, half step. There's no note in between. So whole steps and half steps are really important just because, you know, they form your major and minor 5-finger pattern. So moving forward into that, take a look at the formula for major and minor 5-finger pattern. Go ahead and write this down if you don't have it already. So the formula for a major 5-finger pattern is whole, whole, half, whole. And this makes sense to me because C to D is a whole step. D to E is a whole step. There's a black key in between. E to F is a half step. And F to G is a whole step. And if I were to take it in another key here, okay, and I don't know if you guys have the shared screen on right now. I know that the presentation is taking over your screen, but if you wanted to click on the bottom to take a look at the keyboard I have out, everyone can hear that, right? Yeah. So basically, if you weren't in the key of C major, if I say, hey, I want you to figure out your major 5-finger pattern in the key of E flat. Wow, that's difficult. A lot of you haven't played E flat before. So basically you have to do the whole, whole, half, whole. E flat going to F, because that is a whole step, right? Because we have an E in between. And now I need another whole step. So F going to G. And then now I need a half step. So G going to A flat. And then I need a whole step now. So A flat going to B flat. So that is how you figure out every single major scale or 5-finger pattern. Okay. So make sure that you are able to use this formula for every single key. There's 12 total. So with this formula, you can figure out all of the 12 5-finger patterns. And then we have the minor ones, right? Which is whole, half, whole, 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 half, whole, whole. Makes sense to me. A to B has a note in between. B to C has to be a half step. There's no note in between. C to D has a note in between. And D to E has a note in between. So if I were to take a random minor 5-finger pattern, so back to this keyboard here, if I said, okay, C sharp, I want C sharp minor. So I need first a whole step. So C sharp to D sharp. And then I need a half step. D sharp to E. Now I need a whole step. E to F sharp. And then I need another whole step. F sharp to G sharp. So this is C sharp minor. Okay. So with this formula, I would say that all of you are fully capable of figuring out all 12 major and minor 5-finger patterns. That's 24 total, and that's it. It's just 24 on this instrument. Okay. So we're going to move down now to the formula for major scales. And let me clear this. So the formula for major scales is an extended version of your major 5-finger pattern formula. It is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. I hope all of you can memorize this, maybe saying it out loud a few times. 2 wholes, 1 half, 3 wholes, 1 half. Okay. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Okay. You can use this formula for all 12 notes on the piano. All right. So as you can see with C major, it makes sense, right? You see the C to D is a whole step. D to E is a whole step. So let me mark this. So C to D, D to E, and then E to F is definitely a half step. F to G is a whole step. G to A is a whole step. A to B, whole step. And then B to C, half step. So all of this check out. And if you were to look at the piano right now and pick a random key, you would do the same exact thing. All right. I want to say so far for this level, anyone who's doing preparatory level theory in general should know at least 5 of the 12 scales. They should know C major, G major, D major, A major, and E major. All 5 of these have the same finger pattern, okay? The standard finger pattern that most of you know. And if you notice, it goes from easiest scale to hardest scale. So easiest meaning all white keys for C major scale. G major scale has 1 sharp. D major scale has 2 sharps. A major has 3 sharps. And E major has 4, and so forth. Okay. So formula for major scales. I'm going to move forward. Oops, I just drew something. And we're going to talk about now identifying notes and rest. I think everything here, most of you know. If anything, you know what, how long to hold it down for, but you might not know the name of the note. Please go ahead and take the time right now to take a look to make sure, do you know all of these names? Whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth note. And then you have the rest, right? Whole rest, half rest, quarter rest, and eighth rest. I feel like most of my students, excuse me, are likely unsure about this, the one I'm circling right now. So I think why that one's confusing is because in your primer A and primer B book, you usually see it like this, where I circled it in green. You usually see 2 eighth notes, which is equal to 1 beat. Okay, so this, when you have 2 of them, it's equal to 1 beat. Now, when you split them in half, this is what it looks like here, right? it's a little quarter note with a little flag. And that's why it looks like this. So eighth note is equal to half a beat when you see it by itself, just like how it's printed here. Okay. And the eighth rest looks kind of like a comma, but it has a bit of a straight, line after the curve. And the eighth rest is also half a beat. So I will possibly, you know what? Let me see how much time we have here. I just want to see how much left I have on this. I might quiz you guys at the end just because we may have time, which is good. I'm pretty fast. So identifying notes in rest, make sure you know that your whole notes and your whole rest are 4 beats. Oh, I want to say something about the rest, by the way. So the whole rest here, it doesn't necessarily mean only 4 beats. If you happen to be in a time signature that's 3/4 or 2/4, what that means is the whole measure. So if it's in 3/4, the whole measure is 3 beats of rest. If it's 2/4, the whole measure is 2 beats of rest. Okay, so whole rest is a little special. It doesn't mean only 4 beats. It only means 4 beats if you're in 4/4. Okay. Half rest looks like a hat. Whole rest looks like a hole. I hope that makes sense because a half rest, it looks like a hat upright. Whole rest, maybe there's like a truck or something and it falls into the hole. That was a really bad drawing, but you get what I mean. All right. Quarter rest, squiggly line. Quarter note is 1 beat, right? Half note, you know what that is, equivalent to half rest. So please, 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 please study this. Make sure you know all the names and the values. I'm going to move on. So time signatures. This is, you know what's so interesting? I do not go over this nearly enough just because I assume that most of my students, when they see a time signature, they're likely just looking at this, the top number. And I personally think, for the level you're at, the top number is the more important number because it tells you how many beats per measure. The bottom number 4 is just a symbol. It's a symbol that the quarter note is going to get 1 beat. Okay. So if a quarter note is equal to 1 beat, that means if we had a 2/4 here, we have 2 quarter notes in the measure, or at least a half note in the measure. Whatever the notes combine to, it has to combine to at least 2 quarter notes total, right? Same for 3/4. You would probably have 3 quarter notes or any note that would combine to make 3 quarter notes or at least 3 beats worth of notes. And then 4/4, same thing, right? So the top number, how many beats per measure? The bottom number, it just means quarter note is getting the beat. So if you take a look at the 6/8, some of you have seen this, maybe some of you haven't, and it's okay if you haven't yet because this is a new time signature. The top number means 6 beats per measure. But the bottom number 8 is a symbol of an eighth note here. They spelled eighth note wrong. Oh well. So eighth note is this. That flag one. So that's equal to half a beat. So if it's 6 eighth notes per measure, because remember, 1/8 note is equal to half a beat in 4/4, but in 6/8, it's actually equal to 1 beat. It's kind of like quarter note. So I think that's the confusing part about a time signature is a lot of students ask me, how come all the values change when it's suddenly an 8? Well, it's because they're just trying to make you think that now this is equal to 1 beat. Sorry, that's an eighth note, okay? So that is equal to 1 beat now. So that means in 6/8, you're going to have 1, 2, wow, that's bad, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 of these per measure, okay? So I'll let you guys ask questions at the end. If you are a little confused about this, please write it in your notebook and ask the question, and then we can have Q&A at the end. All right, moving on. Vocabulary and symbols. So as you can see here, all of this vocab, this is from the preparatory level exam sheet. I want to say most of my students know this. If you see something you don't know, mark it in your notebook. So P, piano is soft. So anytime you see a P and you just have to play soft, don't play too hard. F for forte. I always like to use the Italian, so piano forte, don't just say loud and soft, right? So forte, you got to press harder to play loud. Accents. So with accents, usually you see this above or below the note. So it will be something kind of like this. So if we had a note here, yikes. And then you see this below it or above it. That just means to play louder, to stress it, to kind of make it emphasized, right? And then we have slurs. So a slur is a curved line that indicates legato. It could be 2 or more notes, and usually it just means to play it without detaching it. So when you're playing, like, for example, a 5-finger pattern with a slur, instead of playing it like this, I want you to hold each note until you hit the next note, then let go of the last note. That's the way it sounds connected. It doesn't sound like it's detached, right? Staccato. What I just played earlier was staccato, this. So a little bit of a jump, not connected. I like to say detached. I like to say short, light note, okay? And then we have a tie. A lot of people confuse the tie and the slurs. A tie will always be between 2 notes that are the same pitch. So for example, if we have a C tied to a C, the values could be different. It could be a dotted half note tied to a quarter note, whatever, as long as it's the same pitch. The same pitch meaning the same note or the same letter. All right. And then you hold that for the full value of both notes. You don't play it again. So the slur and the tie, everyone should definitely be able to differentiate between these 2 curved lines. All right, repeat sign, that's pretty standard. You learn this in your very, very beginning book. You go back to the beginning or you go back to the other repeat sign. Dynamics. I use this term quite often, and then I have students like, you know, they have a question mark over their head or something because they don't know what this word means. Dynamics is basically any symbol or marking that tells you how loud or how soft you have to play. All right. So if I'm telling you, hey, we need to focus on dynamics, I'm talking about your loud and softness of the piece. That probably just means you're not following any of the markings, or the whole entire piece sounds just one dynamic. Maybe you make one piece sound like forte the entire time, but it's not supposed to, you know? Okay, fine. So moving on to the second column there, fine is the end. It's not fine. You say fine, 2 different syllables here. And it means the end. So usually you will see it at the end of the music, or sometimes you'll see it at the end of a measure. And there's a reason for that. So notice the next term, DC al fine, da capo al fine. Return to the beginning and play to fine. So what that means is maybe at the end of the song, you see something called DC al fine. So when you go back to the beginning, that means there is a fine somewhere, and the fine could be in the middle of the music. And I can draw this out later on if any of you guys have questions about it. Some of you guys have this in your current repertoire, you know, your current set of pieces that you're working on. And some of you have not seen it yet, and that's fine. You will definitely see it soon. Fermata. So fermata means to hold longer. So anytime you see this weird owl looking thing, just like, or sorry, I said owl, the owl eye or something like that, it just means hold the note longer than the pitch intended. So if they give you a half note, you have to hold it longer than 2 beats. If they give you a whole note, hold it longer than 4 beats, okay? Ritardando. Notice they have 3 different words for it. You have RIT, you have retard with a period, and then you have retardando. I often see more this and this. I don't see retard by itself. And I just think it's because, honestly, it's visually, when you look at it, it's kind of weird. Like, why is that word there? It means retardando. Okay, so usually it's RIT with a period for short so that they don't waste ink. And that means gradually get slower. A tempo, return to the original tempo. So you see an a tempo usually if, let me think of an example. If there is a fermata maybe in the middle of your music, and then they wanted you to hold a note, and then when you go on to the next measure, they want you to return to the original tempo. Maybe some people start playing slower, you know, or if there is a tempo change in your music, maybe they tell you to go fast in the beginning, and then there's one section that says slowly, and maybe for 4 measures you play slowly. And then it says a tempo, that means return to the original tempo. So whatever tempo was in the beginning, that's what you need to play at the end. Okay, all this other stuff here, we have bar line. Okay, bar line is right here. Okay, so that's a bar line, basically separating your measures. Measures are this, basically the box here. All right, that's separated by bar lines. You know your treble clef, your bass clef. The brace is this black line right here that's connecting the treble clef and bass clef. And the brace is what makes the grand staff. So overall, this is the grand staff. Okay, I'm going to move on to the last slide here. Okay, let me delete what I just drew. And then this is level 1 vocabulary. So anyone who's taking level 1 CM, this is basically the vocab you would be seeing in your exam too. A lot of Italian here. Crescendo and then decrescendo. So crescendo means gradually get louder. Do not suddenly get loud. It should be gradual over time. Sometimes your gradual needs to happen within a measure. Sometimes your gradually get louder needs to happen within 4 measures. You know, same for decrescendo. Decrescendo has other names too. It has the word dim or diminuendo. DIM is short for diminuendo. So decrescendo, diminuendo mean the same thing, gradually gets softer. All right. So those are your dynamic markings that become more complicated, especially for level 1. And then we have mezzo piano, medium soft or moderately soft, mezzo forte, medium loud or moderately loud. In order, if we were talking about dynamics, the softest that we know for sure is piano, and then the loudest is forte, right? When you're putting mezzo piano and mezzo forte in there, mezzo piano is louder than piano, and mezzo forte is softer than forte. And now notice they're adding even 2 more dynamic markings here. We have a pianissimo, so double P, and that's going to go right here on the spectrum of very soft. And then we have fortissimo, double F, and that's going to go over here as very loud. So as you see here in my very ugly drawing, it gets from soft to loud. So this is basically what's happening here, right? So you're starting from pianissimo, very soft, going to piano, which is soft, mezzo piano, medium soft, mezzo forte, medium loud, forte, loud, and fortissimo, very loud. All right. So with these 6 dynamic markings, this allows you to create the crescendo and decrescendo needed. It's really hard to create a crescendo or decrescendo if you don't have these different dynamic markings. If we only had forte and piano, then what is it? How do we gradually get louder or softer? We need to have more dynamics in between, more variety, right? So moving on from dynamics, I'm going to talk about tenuto. This is an articulation marking. Articulation means any symbol that tells you how to play a note. Okay, so for example, staccato is an articulation marking. A slur is an articulation marking. It tells you to play smooth and connected. Tenuto here is telling you to play the note for the full value. So you're stressing the note, but you're not stressing it like an accent. It doesn't mean to accent or play louder. It means to give it more value. So maybe if you were to play a quarter note, so I'm going to play quarter notes for you here. Maybe instead a tenuto over it would make the note sound like this. See how that has a little bit more value than the prior. The prior, I was just playing it normally. Well, when you add the tenuto, it really gives it a fuller sound. Okay. Pedal marking. So let's look up here, guys. So I'm circling it over here. This is pedal marking. I have a lot of students because the cursive is weird. They're always asking me, what is LED? That's a P, not a L. Okay. So PED is pedal. And then this long bracket type of line here that I'm circling now, that is also a pedal marking. It tells you to hold down and then lift up at the end of the bracket. And then this asterisk type of thing here is basically telling you to lift. So it's usually paired with the pedal sign here, okay? So it's likely you're either going to see this or you're going to see the ones that have arrows pointed towards it. All right. Let's move on. We're going to take a look at the octave sign. So right here, guys, are your octave signs. So 8VA means play 8 notes higher, especially if you see it above in treble clef. If it's above treble clef and you have an 8VA, that means play an octave higher. Now, if you see an 8VA or an 8VB in bass clef, it means play 8 notes lower. So right hand, if I'm playing this middle C here, and I say, okay, it's in treble clef, let's play 1 octave higher, and there's an octave sign, you're going to be playing up here instead. Same for bass clef. If somehow you see bass clef middle C, and then they tell you 8VA or 8VB below the staff, then you're going to play down here. Okay. So that one's pretty straightforward. We have a first and second ending. First and second endings basically mean you are playing a section of music that is a first ending, but you're not going to play that first ending again. After you play the first ending, there's a repeat sign, and it tells you to go back to the beginning of the music. And then you play up until you hit the first ending, but you don't play the first ending, you go straight to the second ending. Okay, so let me say that one more time because that was a little confusing. You play a song and then you get to the first ending. There's a repeat sign. You go back to the beginning. You play the song again. And then when it hits a point where you're about to play the first ending, you're going to skip to the second ending. And that's why we call that first and second ending, because the song may have a similar theme or melody, but the endings are different. Okay. So now last two, repetition. Exact repeating of a melodic pattern in the same voice or the same pitch with the same rhythm. So repetition, it is what it is. So for example, this is repetition. That's repetition, but this is not repetition. Okay, I played C, D, E, D, or C, and then D, E, F, D. Even though it has the same rhythm, it doesn't have the same notes. So therefore it's not repetition. It must be the same notes and the same rhythm. Okay, excuse me, my voice is getting dry. Okay, accidental, sharps, flats, naturals. A sharp means to go up by 1/2 step. So this one here, you have to make sure that it's to the right. Okay, I'm going to put an R there. To the right by 1/2 step. A flat is to the left by 1/2 step. And a natural means white key. All right. So when you see